Go into your room. That's right. Sit on that fat of yours and do nothing but listen to record.
So I was going to do one of my normal written reviews of this deluxe box set, the songs of Bacharach and Costello, but I decided it would be better to do a video because there's so much I can show you that relates to this. This is much more than just an augmentation of Painted from Memory, which many of you know. It finally came out on vinyl from Mobile Fidelity a few years ago. It's a nice package. So it consists of that record on 3 sides of 2 LPs, with the 4th side containing some tracks from taken from life, which was supposed to be a Broadway show that never came out for reasons that are explained in this book that Elvis wrote. And it was reimagined on this set, put together as if it had actually been produced. And how that got together is also part of what's in this wonderful package. It explains it all. And then there are 4 CDs that come with it as well. So one CD is Painted from Memory, and one is called Taken from Life, which is all of these tracks put together as if it was the envisioned show, Broadway show, wherever it was going to run. And that's a fascinating story too, because in the recordings it was Bacharach and Costello, the arranger Vince Mendoza, Audra Mae, John Pagano, Jenny Moldauer, Cassandra Wilson, Bill Frisell, Don Byron, the clarinetist and reed player, Jim Cox, Thomas Bartlett, and the Imposters. So they've all performed these tracks in leading up to this show that never happened, and some of them were recorded just for other Elvis Costello albums, which we'll get to shortly. Then there's another disc it's called Because It's a Lonely World. It's live. It's Elvis Costello and Steve Niece, who I think it's pronounced naive, however it's pronounced. They do a bunch of the songs, and then there's also the 2 of them with the Swedish Radio Symphony Orchestra recorded at one point, and there's 2 songs there, Painted from Memory and What's Her Name Today. And then the 2, Bacharach and Costello, do This House Is Empty, and it all explains where each of these tracks was recorded. I'm not going to give them to you now because I don't have them memorized. Don't have Painted from Memory. And then there's Costello Sings Bacharach and David, and that's also a compilation of really interesting things that I'll get to in a minute. And then there's also the 2 of them, Costello and Bacharach, live doing 5 songs, and that's what's on this box set. So it's a story that goes way beyond just the collaboration of Bacharach, who died in February. And there's an interview that I conducted with him in about 1986 on this website, on the Tracking Out website, so you might want to read that. It came out really good. And that happened by accident. I was tasked by the editor of the Absolute Sound back then when I first joined them to try to get an interview with Burt Bacharach, because I was still living in California, and he was a big fan, the editor was a big fan of the Casino Royale soundtrack and a lot of Bacharach and David songs, and as was I. And so I was sitting in a restaurant, and there was Burt Bacharach. And you really shouldn't bother people in a restaurant, but I couldn't help myself, and I went over to him and I introduced myself, and he was very gracious and said, "Get the hell out of my face." No, he wasn't. He was very gracious, and he said, "Sure," and he gave me his card, and I called him and got a really wonderful interview that you can read. I'm so glad I have that interview. At any rate, I said at any rate, I promised I would never do that again, and I just did. So then, in the mid-70s, Elvis Costello appeared upon the scene, and with this record, which is a classic record, the cover, this was the zeitgeist at the time, was new wave, punk, whatever was coming along, and he's not very convincing there. It's like someone said, "Hey, roll up your dungarees and make a face and be angular and knot your knees together," and then this picture, he almost looks like it almost looks like it almost looks like a captive that he's been kidnapped, and this is it's like, what am I doing this for? But anyway, that's what I thought when I first saw it. wonderful record. It's got a song Allison on it, which is, he's delving into a woman's thoughts, which is a very Bacharach and David kind of thing. And at the same time, this record came out. This was Stiff '01, and this was live tracks that, it was a tour of the Stiff artists. So Nick Lowe was there, and you got Ian Dury, and there's Elvis with a very normal kind of smile on his face. He's not all not neat, and he's not making faces. And what does he do on this? He does, I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself, a Bacharach and David song. And I knew that song because I was a Dionne Warwick fan from way back in the 60s. And I thought that was really interesting that he did a Bacharach and David song. And, as he explains in these liner notes to this wonderful set, most kids didn't pay attention to who the songwriters were on songs. But I knew this. And I wondered at that point why he had that song on there. All of that is explained in such wonderful detail in this book. And I'm going to show you some of it. So here's a picture from, this is the opening page of the book. And this was November 63, and this is the Royal Variety performance that the Queen had. And this is where the Beatles made their first appearance. And they're in here. They're right over here. And this is when John Lennon famously said, the rich people rattle your jewelry, so he could know who they were. And here is Elvis Costello's dad, who was a musician, Mr. McManus, and 1, 2, 4 places over, there's Burt Bacharach, a young Burt Bacharach. Burt Bacharach was there to accompany Marlene Dietrich. He was Marlene Dietrich's musical director, traveling around the world, and she, of course, was a famous actress and also a singer. And he found this as a great opportunity to get overseas and in 1963 and do this, be a performer as well as a songwriter. So that's the beginning of this. And then, Elvis goes into all of the details of his appreciation for American music and for Dionne Warwick. And, I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself was first released by Chuck Jackson. It wasn't the popular version. The Dionne Warwick version probably was more popular. And, Dionne Warwick was the perfect vehicle for the complicated, difficult to sing Bacharach and David song. So this was, a guilty pleasure of mine starting in 63. When I was a teen. I was 16 years old. And the single, Walk On By, it moved me. So I went out and bought the album. That wasn't a time when kids were buying albums, but being an audiophile, I went out and bought it and found a stereo copy. And when I heard this record, it blew my mind sonically. I didn't know at the time it was done by Phil Ramone at A&R Studios. The sound on this record is mind-bogglingly fantastic. What's also interesting about, when you read through Elvis's notes here, he really cared about sound, still does care about sound. He uses the best studios, Avatar, Power Station, East West, and in this book he talks about the sound and the producers and all of that. It's not very common, but he's all over that kind of stuff in this book. And of course, Dusty Springfield also had a hit with I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself. That probably was the first time it was a hit, not the version by Chuck Jackson. No one heard that one. And of course, Dusty Springfield did The Look of Love. I've got the Casino Royale soundtrack here someplace, but this was the Classic Records single, The Look of Love. And the sound on this is absolutely spectacular because Burt cared about sound too. Obviously, they worked at A&R Studios with Phil Ramone. Amazing. And I just brought a bunch of other Dionne Warwick records here. The songs are This Girl's in Love with You. Well, the one that really I've got them all because I bought them all because I just loved the songwriting. There's one in particular. This one. Here Where There Is Love. This is probably a compilation because I just can't believe this all happened in one record. It's got What the World Needs Now Is Love. I just don't know what to do with myself. Trains, Boats, and Planes. Here Where There's Love. Alfie. And then Blowing in the Wind. I don't know what Bob is doing on that, but he was in it. These are, if you can find these records, which you can. I mean, here's this should show you what was going on at that. Here's Dionne Warwick's Golden Hits, 94 cents. I paid 94 cents for this. It's got What the World Needs Now, Message to Michael, I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself, You Know the Way to San Jose, I Say a Little Prayer for You, Trains, Boats, and Planes, Windows of the World, 94 cents. And sonically wonderful. All these Dionne Warwick records are wonderful sounding, including this one where they went to American Sound in Memphis, and she did a great record that includes. It's not a lot of Bacharach and David songs, of any, but she does "Hey Jude" and "Hard Day's Night" and "Do Right Woman" and "People Get Ready" and the Rascal song "People Gotta Be Free." It's a really fantastic version of it. Okay, I'm getting off message here a little bit, but that's okay. I get very enthused about this stuff, and I get off message. So one of the things that Elvis talks about in this book, which will straighten out a whole lot of stuff, is how young people back then didn't really pay that much attention to who the songwriters were. So how many young people in 1963 who bought this record, they bought it and they heard "Baby It's You." They didn't know this was a Bacharach and David song. They just knew it was a really great song. And they also didn't know who Arthur Alexander was. They saw Alexander wrote Anna. They saw Taste of Honey. They probably knew from a Broadway show. So it's true. Young people did not know that this was written by Bacharach and David. But what a wonderful song! And you know, I figure if David Pogue could go on Sunday morning and sing and play the piano, I can do that too. So the lyrics to this song, you know, you should hear what they say about you, cheat, sha-la-la-la-la. They say, you've never ever been true, cheat, whoa, it doesn't matter what they say. I know I'm gonna love you any old way, what can I do? And it's true, I can't help myself, 'cause baby, it's you. I mean, what a great song that is. Pardon my singing, but I'm going to do it anyway, okay? Great song. So he goes on and talks about some of the other great Bacharach and David songs, and I'm just going to go through that now before I get back to this box, actually. The First Love album has a really interesting version of My Little Red Book. You know, it's a Bacharach and David song. I bet you there are people watching this now that don't even know it was a Bacharach and David song. And this record, I remember buying this record at E.J. Corvette's. I walked in, they were playing this on the stereo in the store, and I heard was My Little Red Book, and I bought it. Great record. The Walker Brothers, because Scott Walker ended up, did some really bizarre, dark records later on, but here they were doing Make It Easy on Yourself, Bacharach and David. The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, that was Gaudio and crew from the Four Seasons, but these songs, these Bacharach and David songs, they translated really well to pop and rock, and a lot of them, young people didn't know who was writing them. The Shirelles, of course, they did "Baby It's You." This is a great record, highly recommended. The Shirelles' greatest hits. You cannot go wrong. You get a copy of this on Scepter Records. And, you know, once you get that, you start going, there's all these Shirelles records. I better check them out. So, you know, like, here's Tonight's the Night. It's an original pressing of, it's got Tonight's the Night, which was, Will You Love Me Tomorrow was on here, dedicated to the one I love. Just a great record, great songwriting, of course, you know, Goff and King. And look at that label. That's the original. Record's not in great shape. It plays, in mono, it plays great. When you go crazy for a group, you get the Shirelles sing their songs in the great movie, It's a Mad World. There are no Bacharach and David songs on that one, but I bought it anyway. And of course, the Shirelles' greatest hits.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
Then it goes through, he talks about all the influences of American singers, and the song Please Stay, which was a Drifters hit. If you heard that one, it's a really wonderful take of it. And he ends up doing it. And then, of course, What the World Needs Now and Say a Little Prayer. And he talks about all these great, What's New Pussycat, all these great songs. And the cameo they did in the Austin Powers movie that Burt did, International Man of Mystery. And I have that record. I actually have that soundtrack. I couldn't find it, but I have it here someplace. And then he talks about when he first met Burt Bacharach. So the first encounter that Elvis had was in Hollywood. He was working on the album Spike. They wrote Ocean Way, the song Satellite, and so someone told Elvis that Burt was down the hall, so he wanted to meet him. And the stories are so great to read these stories and how this connection happened. And then he says here the chance encounter kind of, softened him a little bit. He wasn't so nervous. So the next time they met, he wasn't like totally. It's hard to imagine a guy like Elvis Costello being, but they started their recording career at Right Track Recordings on 48th Street. This goes back and forth in time. They did get together, and the sessions from Painted from Memory took place at Ocean Way. I mean, again, all of his records were done, well recorded, and in the best studios. And he says Painted from Memories was not a big hit at the time. It was not a big hit. It wasn't that successful, but it's a wonderful record. There's wonderful songs on it. And then he says, there's barely a person in the world that hasn't heard Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. It Wasn't a Pussycat, Close to You, the Carpenter song. But as he says, I don't think everyone in the audience knew that Burt had also written the theme song of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, or the Dick Van Dyke hit, Three Wheels on My Wagon, it's incredible, the songs this guy has written. When Elvis wrote this, he was 67, and 2 years younger than Burt was when they did most of this work, which was in the 90s, a long time ago. And it goes on, and then it gets kind of interesting. I know sometimes people like these personal stories. In my case, so I'm looking. So at one point, I put the one book down and opened the other book, which has all the credits, and the credits are really completest credits, really, really well done. So everybody that played on everything, and it's got the dates, and it explains everything about this and what album it was from. It says here. Live Stiff, the one that I showed you, was recorded in Norwich, UK, October 17, 1977. Baby It's You, which is on this, came from this record, Out of Our Idiot. And Please Stay came from Kojak Variety. This is a compilation of Elvis Costello's favorite songs. Not a compilation. They were all recorded just for this set, but one song was Please Stay. And then I'll Never Fall in Love from Austin Powers. And then, anyway, it tells you exactly who played what. And then you get to the credits, and I was looking through it, and the box set was produced by Elvis Costello and my friend Steve Berkowitz. So Steve Berkowitz was some of you know this, he was a 16-year-old record buyer at New England Music City, where I first went to buy records when I moved to Boston, and he was responsible for the Beatles' Abbey Road being, the British pressing being at that store, couple of weeks before it came out in America. I still have that copy. It's the best-selling copy of Abbey Road I've ever heard. And Steve is the guy that got me to go to Abbey Road when the Beatles mono box set came out. And someone called me and said, we read your review of the stereo box set, and you didn't much like it because it was cut from digital. So we're going to do the mono box set the way you wanted. Would you like to come to Abbey Road and watch us do this? Said, yes, I'll be there. So I went. So that was Steve Berkowitz. And, Bob Ludwig did the mastering at Gateway. And I said, oh, that's good. And then I look further down, I see special thank you to Eddie Gorodetsky and Chuck Lorre. So Eddie Gorodetsky he's like a main guy at Chuck Lorre Productions. If you watch 2.5 Men or you watch Big Bang Theory, you'll see Eddie Gorodetsky's name there all over the place. So when I was doing radio commercials for New England Music City and Cheap Thrills and on WBCN, and I was upstairs at the Prue weekend nights, I'd go down and go into the store, and Eddie Gorodetsky was working behind the counter as a record clerk. And at one point, Eddie had done a satire, a parody of the song Born to Be Wild by John Kay and Steppenwolf. And I was doing a lot of song parodies on BCN, including I did this parody of Elvis Costello, but that's another story. I called him Abbott Costello. And Eddie handed me the cassette of Born to Be Mild, and I played it, and I didn't think it was that funny, so I didn't put it on the radio. And I swear, I think on some level he's fantastically successful. Obviously, he also produced Bob Dylan's Old-Fashioned Radio Hour. He produced that and wrote a lot of it. He's a brilliant guy. I just didn't find Born to Be Mild too funny, and I don't think he ever forgave me for that, because just a couple of years ago, I got a phone call from these friends of mine who were on my radio show a lot. They had a comedy group called Real Life, and they did a lot of sketches on my radio show. And they called me with Eddie. And I hadn't spoken to Eddie since I told him Born to Be Mild wasn't so funny. Oh, also, back, I played at Max's Kansas City. I was the only stand-up comedian who ever played at Max's Kansas City that I know of. And one of the shows I did, I was opening for John Kay from Steppenwolf. And John Kay never showed up. He did not show up. So I had to do the 2 sets. When you're playing music, okay, you can do the set over again. I had to do the same comedy shtick twice to the same audience. Don't ever do that. It's not a good idea. Anyway, so we're on the phone, and we're talking. And I made a joke to Eddie, knowing that how unbelievably successful he is. I made a joke about, I'm sorry I didn't play that Born to Be Mild song for you, and I'm sorry. And he goes, well, I've been extremely successful since then. I go, oh my God, I didn't know that. Anyway, I'm digressing. So Steve and Eddie are on this, and Eddie is a good friend of Elvis, as it turns out. And the closest I've ever gotten to Elvis Costello was I got a call once from someone who said he needs his turntable set up. Would I be willing to go set it up? And of course I would be. Even if he wasn't there, I'd be happy to do it. But somehow I didn't get that gig, so I never met him, which I'd like to. You know what? That's as far as I'm going to go with this. Other than to say, if you're an Elvis fan, you really. Oh, here's another thing I want to show you. One of the records I got. Oh, this is Look Now, which won a Grammy for Best Record, and this has got Stripping Paper and some other songs. I think there's a few more songs from. And there's. Burt and Elvis in the studio. This is a great record. I've left this record out when I make videos so you could see it. And there's very few Elvis records that aren't great, but this is a good one. Was on Concord. So a couple of years back, this record showed up. Grant Geisman. I don't know who Grant Geisman was. The Dolo record. I never got to review it, but I go through it and I see. It features Albert Lee, Larry Carlton, Tom Scott. I'm mentioning Jim Cox. I'm just mentioning the more famous Leland Sklar and Chuck Lorre and Van Dyke Parks. Chuck Lorre not only produces all these great television shows. My wife is addicted to Big Bang. She just watches it. Like, if it's on, she watches it. She would be happy to watch that and nothing else. And if she sees this, she'll kick me, but I don't care. That's what she watches. And so I look at this, and there's Chuck Lorre playing. He's also a good musician on this record. And the composer, this guy, Grant Geisman, maybe I'll review this now that I see all these ridiculous connections. He wrote a lot of theme songs for a lot of these TV shows. And so Take Your Time is with Chuck Lorre and Dennis C. Brown. And Bernie Grundman mastered it. So again, good sound. They all know good sound. It's just one of these strange coincidences. I know this is not all about me, but I just hope you thought this was interesting. So, as for the sound of this record, I will say that the sound of Bob Ludwig's mastering. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to kick mobile fidelity, blah blah blah. Bob's mastering is much better. The MoFi is kind of dark sounding. I liked it when it first came out. This is much better. It's digitally sourced, of course, also. It's just more right sounding. So everything on this record that Bob mastered it sounds wonderful. In all honesty, I haven't played all of it through because it would take. I'm looking forward to playing all of it through, and I've only played much of it through. And I'm interested to go back and hear the songs that Bob remastered that were on this, and that were on this, and that were on that stiff thing. I bet you things are going to sound even better. It's, obviously the guy's not finished with his career, but this was a high point of his career. And if you're at all a fan of Elvis and a fan of Burt Bacharach, and you're interested in following the thread of Elvis's career from the beginning through meeting Burt Bacharach and their collaborations together, two great songwriters, and it's all here. And that's all I can say about this record. It's a wonderful set, and I'm going to go back and finish listening to it very shortly. All right, that's it. And Eddie, if you ever watch this, I'm sorry I didn't play Born to Be Mild on my radio show, but you've gone on to much bigger and better things than what I'm doing, and that's great. That's cool. And Steve, thanks for inviting me to Abbey Road and being my friend. And you need to get a better turntable, Steve. I'm telling you. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this crazy excursion.